Okay, today's topic is oboe, and I'm going to take a little bit different approach on this. I'm going to go through your notes, which you already have in your notebook, and that basically is an outline, but I'm also going to pull up some different images in that for you to look at as we go through. First thing, in terms of oboe assembly, I'd like you to look at this oboe right here. You'll notice you have, much like clarinet, you have a bell, you have a lower joint, and you have an upper joint. In terms of assembly, though, it's a little bit more fragile than clarinet, besides the fact, that the keys are narrower. There are more bridge keys. An oboe has three bridge keys. There are two in the middle, one on each side of the joint that link together, and then there's also one at the top of the bell here that fits on and across the lower joint down here. So again, three bridge keys on oboe. These are covered by covers right now, but there is cork here, again, cork grease. However, the reed, which has cork on it, we never use cork grease on because we don't want to clog the small hole that's inside. It's also imperative that when we insert the oboe reed into it, the oboe, and we're talking about that. I'll pull up this image. Notice this whole cork piece right here, okay? And also why I have this up, this particular image, notice the difference in the reeds. The two that you're probably going to be the most familiar with or come into contact with in the future are an oboe and an English horn. If it's never occurred to you before, they are a completely different reed. You can't play English horn with an oboe reed or vice versa. Same thing with bass oboe, which you will probably never encounter, or an oboe d'amore, which is sort of like the alto oboe. Again, you won't encounter that either. But that cork, when we insert that into the upper joint, it needs to go all the way down in. There's a metal cup in there, sort of shaped like this, and then the oboe reed goes down into it, and it needs to go all the way to the bottom, so that the hole in the bottom of the reed lines up with the hole in the bottom of the cup. You don't want to leave any gap there. Again, the way we tune an oboe then, which we really don't tune, an oboe just needs to crow a C, an oboe reed needs to crow a C to be able to be played successfully in tune. To tune an oboe, we vary the tube length by inserting it further into our oral cavity or less into our oral cavity. We don't pull and push on the reed itself in the instrument. That causes all kinds of acoustical problems within that, and that's a common mistake that a lot of people make. Reeds themselves are the key to oboe. Say, even with an average oboe, if it's in good alignment and everything, if you don't have a good reed, you're not going to be able to make it work. This is a picture of what's often referred to by oboists as the blank, and this is what the device that oboe reed makers buy that come this way. Notice you have your cork and then this brass tube going all the way through it. The reed then is folded over and tied. Pull this back over for you. Sliced here. And then there's a lot to do with this that I'm not going to go into with any of this. You're welcome to look online. There's tons and tons and tons and tons of information about making oboe reeds and the parts of oboe reeds and such that make them better. And then it's tied with thread here to keep it together. But there's nothing sealing it other than just the natural two halves coming together on the sides. And then you have this small opening up here. Okay? We'll say one part of the oboe reed right here in the middle. That's referred to as the heart of the reed. Okay. If at all possible, your students need to get reeds from qualified reed makers. That's one of the biggest necessities of having a private oboe teacher, is that they can either obtain reeds, or maybe they even make the reeds or adjust the reeds for the students as they go. They're Lesher reeds, store-bought reeds, which are the ones that the folks in our class have used, are adequate. They'll work okay, but they're about the only store-bought reed that I'm familiar with that are acceptable. It's imperative, and in your notes you've got some good starting points. Also, you have starting points, and I hope all of you know oboists who get their reeds or make reeds from somewhere. Find a supplier, and then keep that supplier in business by regularly ordering reeds, even perhaps sometimes when you don't need them. You can stockpile them and then sell them further on. Um, Oboe hand position, moving on. This is about the best picture I could find. Notice the angle coming out, how it's higher. It's essentially a 45-degree angle if we look at the plane here and the plane here, whereas clarinet is more of a 33-degree angle coming down in this direction. And again, we have the whole idea of the C's. There's a thumb rest here. I couldn't find a good picture of this, but this thumb, there's a little bit of controversy on what to do with it. Some oboists advocate, I think Miss Anderson's one of these, that we place that thumb against the back of the oboe where it can flex like on a clarinet against that octave key. The person I had teaching my oboes in San Antonio, Mark Ackerman, who's the principal of the San Antonio Symphony, used to teach to keep the thumb in midair above the key. And so that left hand had zero tension in it whatsoever. The biggest thing is you don't want them to anchor that left thumb down away from the octave key, so that they've got to make a big motion to touch the octave key. And we'll talk about octave keys in just a little bit too. Also, just like on all woodwind instruments, you can see in this black and white little image here, tucking this pinky in behind the oboe or any woodwind instrument is one of the worst things they can do. And kids sometimes want to do that as a way to help balance it. Embouchure-wise, this is a decent picture of it, and at first look on this, you may think that, well, then it's just pretty much a clarinet embouchure except double lip, and that's really about the furthest thing from the truth. If you could see within this embouchure right here, you would see, if she's doing it properly, that her teeth are apart. There's no teeth involved in the oboe embouchure. The best way to form an embouchure is, and you can try this with a pen or something, is just, if you'll place the reed, open the mouth like an ah, place the reed on the lower lip, and then just roll both lips in. But the teeth all stay apart. Okay, so you have an oral cavity that's pretty wide open. Again, like on bassoon, like on flute, and even to some extent on the single reeds, that oral cavity and the shape of it has a huge impact on the timbre that we elicit from the horn. Okay. Parts of the oboe, again, we have the upper joint, the lower joint, and the bell. They call it upper section, lower section, bell. I did want to point this out, though. First octave key and second octave key. In truth, there are really 3 octave mechanisms on oboe. The first octave key mechanism is the one that we use for our 6-finger note. So any fingering that uses fingers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and whatever pinkies we might be using to raise the pitch an octave on oboe with a 6-finger note plus or minus pinkies, we half hole the hole on the first finger. And so that leak creates the jump in the octave. Think of that in relationship to flute. The 6-finger note on flute is D with the pinky, it's E flat. By raising our first finger, that raises the pitch an octave. Same thing on oboe. The second octave key is on the side. The first, or the primary octave key, is in the back. So moving up from the 6-finger note to finger 5, 4, and 3, we use the back octave key. But then once we reach the 2 and 1 fingering, we use the secondary octave key, which is on the side. Now, as much as it doesn't look similar to everything else, this is exactly the same mechanism in terms of the octave mechanism that happens on saxophone. Except on saxophone, that octave key is all handled mechanically through the key under the thumb, and both happen differently. You know, if you remember back to saxophone, I showed you the thing where if you pick up, go from fingering 3 to fingering 2, the octave key in front of your face on the neck raises. That's the second octave key on saxophone. On oboe, it's right here on the side. All right. Getting back to the handout, a couple of little things. Obviously, support the lips, not the teeth. The lips are support the reed, not the teeth. Again, we generally want, I'm going to get back to that picture of a reed. We generally want a good half of this reed in the mouth. So the lower lip would hit right in here. And there's a tendency to want to put, and this is an appropriate tendency, as we rise in the range, to put more reed in our mouth. So even to the point that the reed or the lip gets down this far on the reed. And that's just to, as you're trying to get those higher pitches, to allow that there's more reed to vibrate to get those higher pitches out and such like that. Articulation, both oboe and bassoon, to teach articulation. If you've noticed, this is what we did in class. Whereas on clarinet and flute, we worked, and I would do this on saxophone also, we worked on the head joint mouthpiece combination, mouthpiece barrel combination on clarinet, and fast articulation. Same thing on oboe, except don't teach articulation on the reed. Teach it on the entire instrument. Just pick a good note like an A or a G or an F sharp and have them make a sound and then articulate on it quickly. The reed masquerades too much of what's going on the tongue. On the whole horn, you'll hear what's happening. Clarinet and flute is the other way around. The horn masquerades. You can tell more with just the sound-making device, if you will, on that. Most of the same rules on tonguing. Tip to the tip, and it's a very quick up and down motion. Tongue is in the bottom of the mouth 98% of the time. Please take special interest to the handout I gave you on the sources for oboe supplies and reeds. There's a lot of good information in there. I know a lot of you that are really interested in teaching woodwinds for your advanced methods course. I strongly advise you to take the oboe bassoon course. You'll get to spend some quality time on it, even though most of you in this class didn't get to. It's well worth it in that. Don't be afraid of teaching oboe. Don't be afraid of teaching bassoon, but do make sure you have working equipment. Make sure you have enough knowledge about the instruments, and don't be afraid by the mechanisms. It's really quite simple. And have your students to have good reeds, and be ready to encourage them and work to get the right students on the instruments. What I looked for, one last final thought, in oboe always was a student that was very self-sufficient, that was a creative problem solver, because an awful lot of times they just have to make things work. You can't attend to their every need at all. And then the other thing is somebody that doesn't mind accepting some individual praise and criticism, if you will. That's not afraid to stand out of the crowd, because just by the nature of the beast with oboe, the timbre sticks out, and you're gonna have to, those players playing that instrument are going to be addressed individually a lot. And if that's not in that child's psyche to be able to handle that, then they're probably not on the best instrument for them. That is oboe. Thank you.